Picturesque and inviting to all who meander through its tranquil walkways, St. Kitts Independence Square is the chosen home for a monument to the abolition of slavery and the slave trade. Unesco, a specialized agency of United Nations, declared the year 2002 United Nations Year for Cultural Heritage and provided initial funding to St. Kitts to launch this project.
Back in December of 1999, a proposal was submitted to the Permanent Secretary of Tourism and to the Minister in reference to upgrading Independence Square by adding statues and plaques which can narrate our history from slavery to independence. This was accepted by the Permanent Secretary and the Minister and gave me the okay to go ahead and find sources of funding, etc., to go ahead and do that. From some background information I had before approaching the Permanent Secretary, I knew that UNESCO had a fund set aside for places on the slave route, anywhere on the slave route, to upgrade them in order to do just the sort of thing that we were looking for. So the proposal was submitted to UNESCO in 2000, in January of 2000. We got it right at the deadline for that submission year. Crichton Pension, who was the current director of, he was in culture at the time, was approached because he had attended a previous slave route meeting some months before and had all the background information. We both, Crichton and I, approached Don Manchester Joseph, who gave us all the information. The three of us sat down really and put a proposal together within a day because the deadline was very, very quickly approaching. That was sent off to UNESCO. Just to keep in mind, the proposal was to enhance Independence Square. It was not a proposal for St. Kitts, for putting monuments all over St. Kitts. It was to enhance Independence Square, to so it could be a place of for the public, a peace area that we would enhance as a place where slavery occurred. It was, we seem to have forgotten that Independence Square was a former slave market. Our history tells us it was a former slave market. But today, as you pass by Independence Square, we have no way of knowing that. We have lots of tourists come to the area, they have no way of knowing. The idea was to erect a monument in Independence Square, something that will give us a narrative, a history, to tell the history of what happened there. We also wanted to do plaques around the square, the houses on the square, etc., to say what the houses were used for.
It was on the proposal of Haiti, which I think you've heard about before, and the African countries who are the initiators of the project, that the General Conference of UNESCO, during its 27th session, approved the implementation of the slave route project. And the official launch took place in Benin in 1994. And basically it is really about educating the people of the world about the travesty and the tragedies that took place during the slave route. The project has a twofold objective. On one hand, we hope, will put an end to the silence surrounding the tragedy of the slave trade by bringing to universal attention the issue of the transatlantic, Indian Ocean and Mediterranean slave trades, all those slave trades that took place. So when UNESCO funds a project like this in one of its member states, it is hoping that the stress will be on public education. The people need to know the facts surrounding the tragedy of the slave trade and some of the things that took place along the passage. Thousands and millions of Africans were taken from their homes in Africa and brought along this journey to islands in the Caribbean and islands in other parts of the world, countries in other parts of the world. And not too much is being said about the things that they encountered. Either what they encountered negatively or what they contributed to the establishment of civilizations positively. And the theme that UNESCO has established surrounding the project is breaking the silence. It is going to create some controversy among the peoples of the world, because if you're breaking the silence, you are disclosing issues and, I guess in some instances, blaming people. But the silence needs to be broken. The Jews broke the silence surrounding the Holocaust, and there's no need for us to be silent about the facts surrounding the slave trade.
It was the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment during our first term got wind of the fact that UNESCO was mindful to get involved in some type of effort to have the world reflect on the transatlantic slave trade and to learn all of the human lessons that ought to be learned from that horrible activity, and also to ensure that, having learned those lessons, in the process, not only would the silence be broken, but the horrific notion or activity of slavery would never be repeated. So we initiated the process with UNESCO and got confirmation and support from UNESCO to do a monument here in St. Kitts.
The history of the Slavewood Project in St. Kitts is one that saw the then Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment conceptualize a project to memorialize the fact that our ancestors came here as slaves and eventually won their freedom as a result of persistent clamoring and insistence on the fact that as people created in the image of God, we were to be free. I believe that the role of this ministry, since tourism has the ministerial responsibility for spearheading the Slavewood Project in St. Kitts, the role of this ministry is to collaborate and fully support all initiatives that will result in the establishment of a monument to the abolition of slavery, and a monument that will celebrate the fact that though we may have come here as slaves, today we are a people free and proud. The role of my ministry is to collaborate on all energies, especially those with regard to awareness, sensitization, education, and all efforts that will result in our people knowing what the monument will symbolize for all.
Independence Square appears to be a peaceful space where you can see people enjoying its pleasant surroundings, but behind its facade lies a tormented past.
We know all the horrors which went on during the transatlantic slave trade. Because St. Kitts was small, the British were able to exert greater control over slaves in St. Kitts. That is not to say that there weren't attempts at resistance and rebellion, because we know the story of Marcus, King of the Woods, who was a slave at Cunningham Estate in Keon, and who, along with a band of fellow slaves, resisted the plantocracy at that time. We know for a fact by archaeological evidence that there are holding cells all around the square. In the Georgian house, below the Georgian house, below Horsford's and the other buildings around there. Those were holding cells where slaves were kept and fed in order to be sold and auctioned at Independence Square. So we know that for a fact. And it is known that there are still relics of shackles and chains attached to the walls of those holding cells. I think it's necessary that some effort be made to document, properly research and document this part of our history, because I think far too long this aspect and other aspects of our history have been kept in silence, and hence UNESCO's initiative of the Slave Route Project, breaking the silence.
It is absolutely important that we do so. It's our first opportunity to go back to our roots. I mean, for centuries we've been out here trying to get back, and many of our ancestors would have liked to go back. Oh, they longed to go back to Africa, and they had to die in cane ranges in the Caribbean, because when they became useless on the plantation, they did not get a decent death. They did not die in bed and get a decent burial. They were driven off the plantations to wander around the cane ranges, to be eaten by hogs and wild dogs. And the spirits of our ancestors are still roaming about, wishing they could rediscover the land of Africa. And I believe that it will appease them, because I believe in these things. It will appease the spirits of our ancestors to know, to look on and find us trying to rediscover the transatlantic roots, that route that brought them here to die in the cane ranges.
Well, I see it as an opportunity to finally recognize our forefathers in many different ways, especially martyrs, the people who paid the ultimate sacrifice of giving their life for us to be able to enjoy the degree of freedom and life that we have today. Because we must always remember it was a struggle, and giving your life isn't something easy that people do today. And while back in the past there weren't no monuments or any recognition about such people, it is time for us, now we have matured and gained independence, to try and validate these people to the process that we could build a monument in recognition of their contribution. And there's no more rightful place than actually in the center of the square, which we know as a slave market, and insignificance of the statue that is presently there, because it neither represents independence or colonialism or statehood. So it's insignificant to us. So we see our maturity and our thinking has reached a level that we could now validate and pay tribute to our people with a statue in the middle of Independence Square.
Being creatures of nature, we should easily embrace our ever-shifting and ever-changing environment. But acting out of habit, we don't always welcome change easily. Let's see some of the ideas being proposed for this new monument.
Myself and Mr. Crichton Pension was commissioned with the responsibility of co-chairing the creative team for this particular project. And we immediately went about establishing our members by drawing from a wide cross-section of our artistic community. Today we'll have an opportunity to meet some of the persons who participated in this process. Essentially, our core function or role was to develop a design concept for the monument using very clear guidelines. And if you'd permit me, Marlene, I'd like to just share with our viewers some of the elements of our guidelines. We are to develop this concept that would reflect one monument with a realistic depiction that would embrace the ideals of slavery, freedom, and independence. We looked at defining the best use materials for construction, detailing the dimensions, estimated costs of materials, the sourcing of expertise, as well as the graphic presentation of the historical language that would accompany the monument, time frame for construction, and one of the very important guidelines is that we insist that the artists who participated in the whole process would be there working along, assisting the expert to produce this particular monument from the very inception to the completion. So that is something that is very, very significant. Now, the artists were called in and they were asked to submit individual concepts, because we feel that it is very essential that everybody has an opportunity to share their ideas.
She introduced to me the Slavehood project and what it was all about, and she gave me their ideas and what they were expecting, and asked me to put my ideas together to get a design for the monument, and we did that, and we came up with this.
Well, my contribution was connecting the drums towards the piece of work here. It's like the drum is a connection to Africa. Our roots are from Africa, and I think it best to put the drum there, you know what I mean? Because after freedom, you must get some kind of music to marry up the soul, you know what I mean?
Well, I was, as a potter, sculptor, so on, I was approached by Buchanan Lamb, sorry, and I was asked, we were given a briefing about the project, and was asked to come up with a sculpture, a miniature sculpture that would depict what our view of the monument should be.
The whole monument is a very symbolic project. The base of it would have water around it, and it is connected by a four-pronged bridge. And this, you can see a clearer picture here, and this water and the crossing of the bridge is very symbolic to the crossing of the slaves from Africa to the Caribbean. That is the transatlantic movement. It would allow persons to walk across and move around and interface with the monument itself. Now we reach the substructure, which is the actual base of the monument, and this base again represent the platform on which most of our slaves were sold and showcased during the time of slavery. It would have plaques on all sides of the monument explaining the story of slavery from its inception right up to our independence. Surrounding the plaque, we would have reliefs or raised figures that would capture and depict all the atrocities of slavery. This again is very instructive. On top of the monument, and I would just like to go into further details in terms of the dimension, we are looking at approximately 10 feet in height and about 10 to 8 feet in width. The figures atop, that sits atop the monument, the base of the monument itself, are three figures. One is a male in a very strong, free, prominent position, and a female again in a freedom stance. And there we have a little child, a boy, playing the drums. We know that from Africa we inherited the drums. It's a very symbolic instrument for our people. Even today, it is integrated in part of our culture, our musical heritage. And we thought that it was essential to also depict our flag of independence. It has its own statement and its own meaning. It lends its own meaning to the entire monument itself. And these figurines would stand at a height of approximately 8 to 10 feet. Very prominent and beautiful. It is intended to have upturned lights to add more brilliance to the whole monument, and the whole surrounding area would be aesthetically landscaped with African plants and tropical plants that is common to St. Kitts, and we are hoping to place strategically benches so that family members and people and tourists and visitors can come and appreciate this beautiful masterpiece. So you can see that this entire project in itself should be something that is exceptionally unique and powerful, and hopefully a work of art that would be appreciated not only for its significance and its meaning to our people today, but for generations to come.
The concept of erecting a monument to the memory of anyone or anything that has significantly shaped a person or a country is highly commendable. But the reality of this great task is that it is a long and arduous road that must be traveled before it is manifest itself in all its glory.
The physical planning division is divided into two sections, the development control section and the development planning section. The development control section is responsible for reviewing all applications with respect to building permission. The development planning section deals principally with land use zoning. So we do future land use zoning for different settlements in St. Kitts. Apart from that, we also have what is called a geographical information system, which is digital or computerized mapping. And that is used as an aid to decision making. As most of the viewers are aware, there has been a lot of public debate recently with respect to this project. I was asked by the Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Doya Astefan, to head a committee to advise government with respect to the technical feasibility of relocating the existing monument in the center of Independence Square. That is what we call the fountain. Our remit is to determine whether or not it is technically feasible to remove the existing monument wholesale or piecemeal, and the costs involved in removing the monument. It is premature for me to give the names of the members of this subcommittee, but basically they are very prominent public and private sector architects, engineers, and contractors in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as a few people who are involved in heritage work, the protection of heritage sites.
We had a launch of the project held symbolically in Independence Square in April. We were fortunate to have both the Minister of Culture and Tourism at that launch. It went very well. The atmosphere was brilliant, seemed to serve the purpose well. Following that, we've made various presentations in some schools. We've made a presentation at the Rotary Club luncheon at Fairview Inn. That also went very well. We believe that because we were able to take with us some images of what the monument is likely to look like, that sort of got some converts within that group and hopefully beyond, because I believe that we were able to put it in a more positive light.
When we looked at Independence Square, we did not see any memorial to commemorate what took place at that hallowed spot. So we decided to submit a project to UNESCO to erect a monument which would symbolize not the horrors of slavery, but the resilience, the fortitude of a people who have survived against all odds.
We have to be bold in our thrusts to empower our own selves by not only doing what is necessary for our ears, but doing what is necessary for our eyes and for our souls. Regardless to what we call Pall Mall Square, the fact will never change. It was a slave market.
We have a program currently in place that we are in the process of implementing, which includes doing panel discussions on today's radio and television every other Tuesday. We are going to be doing town hall meetings, taking the message of self-love and self-empowerment throughout the island.
The St. Christopher Heritage Society, I think, has been in the forefront of the recognition of the African presence and contribution to our development. It is through the society and the initiatives of the society that, for example, August Monday, the designation August Monday was changed to Emancipation Day. And this was done through a resolution that went to government, that was passed at a general meeting. We have definitely taken a lead in emancipation celebrations, in trying to get groups and organizations together, including government departments. And we have had exhibitions that have tried to educate people as to what Africa is about, the role of Africa and the presence of Africa in the Caribbean and in St. Kitts in particular. The erection of a monument to the abolition of slavery is essential. It is essential in terms of the recognition of the role of slavery and emancipation and plantation society in creating the people we are today. And why I say it's essential, it's a physical presence, and we do not, whilst we have the people of African descent that make up the majority of the population, and whilst all around us we see monuments of European origin, right, and the architecture and monuments to Europeans and things like that, there is really very little or nothing that represents the physical presence of the Africans that came here and the circumstances under which they came here, and the presence that remain in the descendants, their presence that remain in the genetic makeup almost of the population. And this presence, the presence of a monument that represents the people of Africa who were brought here under these terrible circumstances, but who have become Caribbean people in all sense of the word, and this is now their world. I think it is important to have the erection of a monument as a reminder and as a recognition of the role they have played in our history and culture and the development of culture. All of us, whatever our origin, the African contribution is very much a major ingredient of Caribbean culture and Kittitian culture, of course, which is part and parcel of that. Therefore, it is right that such a monument exists.
I'll be frank with you, I've not tried to personalize this in terms of what it would mean to me as an individual. But I certainly feel that it is something which should be done and something which ought to have been done, in the sense that it says so much about our history, our culture, and about us as a people. And I think what the monument will be trying to do is to capture some sort of a vision of the past and to project that vision into the future so that it might speak to us now, it might speak to our children and grandchildren. And I'm hoping that fundamentally it will serve two purposes. And these are important to me. One would be inspirational. I think the monument should evoke certain emotions in us as a people. If it doesn't do that, I fear that it could be worse than useless. it to be just a block of whatever. But I think that it should evoke certain emotions in us. I think, for example, it should tell us something about ourselves, how we have become what we are. I hope also it would capture something about, it's an indefinable something which I can't really put my finger on. But I hope that the monument, whether it is of a single person, male or female, or whether it's a mass of persons, I hope it will capture something of the strength and the resilience and the faith of our foreparents. Because I think that that indefinable spiritual quality, if I might define it that way, is something which not even slavery, with all of its brutality and its denigration.
Slavery must mean something to every human being with a heart in his or her chest and a conscience and a soul. And what it must mean is something horrific and unacceptable to the human condition. And the fact that it existed is horrific enough. It would be even more horrific if monuments or mementos or whatever you wish to call them were not put in place to ensure that such a thing would never be repeated. The breaking of the silence is such a fitting term to describe the entire process. I have found that in the process here of public education, in fact, enhancing people's awareness, there has been a stimulus for dialogue and discussion, not only on this subject, but other subjects which are of public importance. And what this will have done, hopefully, is not only get us where we ought to be, or ought to have been some time ago, with regard to remembering and ensuring that it never happens again, as do the Jewish people do with the Holocaust experience, which I think, tragic and horrific as that was, is nowhere near as expansive and awful as the Atlantic slave situation has been, and we're still feeling the effects now, the entire human race.
Well, if you ask what does the erection of the monument to the abolition of slavery mean to me personally, my answer to that would be, it means to me that we have finally accepted the fact that we are a people who should be celebrated. In St. Kitts and Nevis, there are monuments in many different shapes and sizes and colors and forms to several things which are not terribly meaningful to us as a people. This is an opportunity, I believe, when a monument that pays tribute to us as a people is going to be put in a space that is sacred, that is central, and that is significant. What it means to me, therefore, is that I can feel vindicated and I can feel validated in a tangible fashion. I hope that in addition to what it will mean to me personally, that it will have added significance to my children and to my children's children. So for me personally, it will be a legacy that I would have seen get life in my own lifetime, and something that did not happen and potentially could not happen in an era that was before my time. We have the opportunity, we have the means, we have the knowledge, and we have the history that supports a monument to our people.
Although innocent in its purpose and intention, the erection of this monument has been shrouded in controversy.
But there couldn't be any other place. Independence Square was where our ancestors first put their foot down on earth. I imagine some of them must have kissed the ground after that grueling journey across the Middle Passage. Although they hated the fact that they were so far away from Africa. It was the first step on land, on that square. And what they met there was not anything great. They knew they would be auctioned off. The masters and the masters' sons would come to examine them. Examine the gold, examine the men, to take them out to the plantations, to live for the rest of their lives. But it was from that place that they were taken. So what other place? If we are talking about establishing a monument to our ancestors, where else in St. Kitts could we put that monument? But at the place where our ancestors first put foot on land.
And with this project, do you believe that this is just the first step?
It has to be a first step. There are going to be many other steps. Matter of fact, I listened to a very intelligent suggestion the other day, that a monument should be built to all the slaves. There is a roll of every single slave who lived in St. Kitts in 1800. The full list of them, because they had to, estate by estate, had to have the names of their slaves. And these exist at the archives. And what we have to do is to make our children in schools and their parents aware of the existence of this list of our ancestors. And let each Kittitian adopt an ancestor and build a huge monument with their names on them, the names of our ancestors, something very much like the Vietnam Memorial, with the names of these thousands of black people who lived in St. Kitts during the days of slavery. This could be another step. This could be a shrine. Our people would go there instead of going down to that war memorial to memorialize the white people who died to protect other white people in Europe. Because every name on that place down there is a white person's name. There's one black person, he was shot, he was court-martialed because he smoked cigarettes in the trenches. I understand he was the only black person there. And instead of having our children go year after year to keep a service at the War Memorial, we can have our people make a big thing about the Slave Memorial, with all the names of our thousands of our black ancestors. Some of them are people who we may have sprung from. So that this thing in the square is just a small beginning, and it is an important small beginning. And there are going to be, I believe, the silence is now being broken, and there is going to be developed a roar of activity among our children and our people. Noise, reclaiming our identity and acknowledging where we come from, and going back to our roots across the transatlantic, across the Middle Passage.
Deep-rooted emotions have been unearthed in determining where in Independence Square this monument will have its final resting place. Deep-rooted emotions have been unearthed in determining where in Independence Square this monument will have its final resting place.
Where do you think it should be? Join us again on Culture Beat as we continue to bring you interesting facts about St. Kitts, its culture, and its people.
Build me